good. I think we're good. Everyone's approved to record. Wonderful.
Yay.
All right,
Right.
so I am here, everyone. Welcome to another edition of our Origins series. This is for a wonderful audiobook that was just released about a week and a half ago called What Would Mrs. Astor Do? Primarily about Caroline Astor, but about all the actually Cecelia, it's the Moors. What is the subtitle? Forgive me.
It's Sorry. the etiquette, the manners and mores of
Manners
the
and
Gilded
mores.
Age. And mores are kind of the little ethical fillip that are necessary to integrate into the conduct of the Gilded Age.
Yes. So this is all
Let's
about the Gilded Age, and I am excited to have you here to talk about the release of this book.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a little bit about how we met in Las Vegas. But and then I want to speak about how we got Carol Monda on this book as well. So first I'm introduce and we'll talk a little bit about your last name because I'm intrigued about its pronunciation. Cecelia Tichi.
That's it. You got
Yes,
it.
Professor Cecelia Tichi. So, thank you so much for writing this book and for being with us here. And then we have Carol Monda, who did a fantastic job as the primary narrator of this. But I need to say that also we had Cecelia narrating some, and then I popped in there for a few parts here and there to
Yeah.
help out with the process. But welcome to our third edition of Origins here. Cecelia, can we start with you? And I just want to know, um, what, drove you to start to study the Gilded Age and that topic? Was it something from your youth? Was it you were intrigued by something from that period? What was the reason that you started studying that?
Well, what starts anybody's book? What's the trigger? For me, I think it was the realization that we are in a new Gilded Age. About 15, 20 years ago, the New York Times bannered on the front page of the Sunday edition, we're in a new Gilded Age. And at the time, the bankers were the moguls. Now, of course, it's the techies. But
Sure.
as we look at what's up these days, money competing against money. Here's Bezos rents Venice for his wedding, and it's a big celebration. And this is the gilding on the Gilded Age. Fortunately, Mark Twain gave us the handle. In France, it's the Belle Époque, the beautiful time.
Mhm.
In England, it's the Edwardian period, same period named for the Prince of Wales, who will soon then be crowned as Queen Victoria's son, Edward the Seventh. But here, the Gilded Age with that glitter and shine on the surfaces, but something underneath that's not quite authentic. The base metals are under there, and the tension between the top shine and the base metals, we don't need to recite income inequality, all the problems. There they are. So long before my fellow teachers were teaching anything about the Gilded Age, I offered a little seminar at Vanderbilt University. And I confess, I fumbled around. What should we read and why should we read it? And what is this Gilded Age? But then it began to, I decided to set aside a book that I
Oh,
was planning to write on a man named Griffith, for whom Griffith Park is named
oh
in
wow.
LA. And the observatory, the Griffith Observatory, he bought that telescope. And
Oh,
what's
Wow.
so interesting about him is that in a hotel in Malibu, in his drunken delusion that his Catholic wife was in league with the Pope to poison him and distribute all his money, great wealth from mining, to the Vatican, he pulled out a pistol and put her on her knees to swear she was faithful. The gun went off. Let me not go on and on with the story, but Griffith spent 3 years in San Quentin
Wow.
and fortunately had a brilliant defense lawyer, or he would have been hanged. I was researching his story, which is a kind of Gilded Age story, but I was getting nowhere. All the mining in Mexico, mining in Nevada, spending my days, and I thought, stop it, Cecelia Tish. This is, it's interesting that he did all this. It's interesting that he got into prison reform after he got out of San Quentin. That's
Ah,
interesting. But is anybody going to care? Why not go back to that seminar you did with a handful of Vanderbilt students and you kind of fumbled your way through the Gilded Age? Let's take it seriously. So let me just say this much. Anybody preparing to write a book has to think, what do I know already? And what do I need to know? And how do I get all that info? And that's where I started. And there came Mrs. Astor instead of Griffiths. That's the story.
And she
beautiful.
was the cornerstone to all the, the
She,
lavishing of that era.
because she was the leading social authority. She was armored in graciousness.
Sure.
Nobody ever broke through that facade. Endlessly pleasant. When one of her daughters had an extramarital affair, and the letters between this rogue daughter and her lover were published in a newspaper, all
Ah,
of society wondered, what will happen? Divorce, divorce. What will Mrs. Astor do? Well, Mrs. Astor invited everyone to a reception, stood at the foyer of her home there in Fifth Avenue, welcomed everyone, and she was alongside that very daughter, now a divorcee, and they smiled and they received their guests, and society went on. So Wall Street made the money, and Mrs. Astor told everybody how to spend it. I'll give you the word that I will now use as a synonym for Mrs. Astor. She was the premier influencer of the Gilded Age.
Wow.
absolutely. That's
Interesting. And
Yeah.
so, in researching, because this book is so chock full of wonderful tidbits about that era. Did you have a team to help you research for
Oh,
that?
I wish. I wish.
This was all you,
No,
really?
it was me. But let me say this. Vanderbilt University was very supportive and generous. So I had some time
Okay.
beyond summers. I had some semesters, whole semesters, to just dig in, get into the library, bury myself there, and that kind of a schedule. Thanks to Vanderbilt University. Of course, I met all my obligations. Let me not define myself as some kind of a scalawag professor. Nothing was better than being in the classroom with young people. Nothing. But the university arranged for time so I could do this. I did not have I did not have an assistant.
That's tremendous. That's a tremendous amount of work, and kudos for that. Um, Carol,
yeah.
How did it feel bringing your, in-depth sections to life and to inhabit someone from that period?
That's exactly the word I think that I feel as though I was given the gift of inhabiting that whole time, let alone the characters. And that the more I learned, the more I became clear about what those manners and mores were. And it really informed the style of narration that I used. Just a little bit more proper, a little bit more formal, but more than that, I was just constantly on a ride of learning about these people and laughing about some of these foibles that they had, um, and even the ones that um, really led to great successes. Um, I think it's so clearly drawn, these characters and their personalities, that I could really just become them.
And how did it feel to be someone of high society back in
Yeah, that was a stretch, but it felt great because that whole era has been fascinating to me since I was young, and there was even a book called The Gin Lovers that kind of crosses over that time period, but it only touched on the characters, the cast of characters in that era, and this was such a deep dive into these people and even the places. I'm lucky that I live in New York. I live in Brooklyn, but I did live in Manhattan for 25 years, and so all of the places that you talk about, and even Newport, I've only been there once, but I also toured a lot of the mansions, and but back to New York, I felt that much closer because I knew where 61st and Fifth Avenue was. Um, that kind of thing really helped me, take on that idea of, if that one building, which is now, several different dwellings, um, and or societies, um, if that one huge building was a home, it just naturally led to feeling a part of that high society. That yes, of course, every inch of the place would be well appointed, and if not embellished, sort of, I don't know, I guess I would say classy, even though it was the Gilded Age, even though it was garish in some ways, but it made me love those people because they didn't know any better. They didn't know that it wasn't honest humanity to put on these airs. So it made me feel, it made it. I felt permission to kind of take on that whole attitude. I think the whole society had a very similar attitude, unlike now, I think, where there are pockets of different neighborhoods in New York, and they each have, to some degree, they have their culture, but this age overtook New York, overreached the real estate, and became this institution of manners.
I love that phrase. This period overtook New York, overtook it. And I would say, listening to you, I think it takes a New Yorker to read this book and record this book. Good, the right
Yeah.
person, the right person. Um, Gotham at the time already called Gotham the financial center of the world, and the dollar becoming the premier currency for the world. It's just, looking back, amazing. It is important to recognize that this highly wealthy new money, I mean, and some of them were called kings of corn, kings of pork. It was, in a way, the first generation to be so elaborately wealthy, and there were no income taxes. They thought of themselves as charitable in their donations, mostly through their churches. J.P. Morgan was a very devout Episcopalian, visited churches as they opened, donations, very, very generous. For those who were impoverished, or those who fell upon hard times one way or another, the attitude was not that they deserved their fate, but rather that they were victims of misfortune. A very different concept. Not so much survival of the fittest and let everyone else fall into the ditches by the wayside. No, no. It was rather pity for those who had suffered misfortune.
Wow.
And among their own people, there were various cousins and uncles who themselves did not succeed on Wall Street. And they too were to be seen as sad, societies. Again, I'm using this word a third time, victims of misfortune, certainly to be invited for holiday dinners, and regrets that they had not done well in their investments. And of course, regrets that those who came in from the countryside or who had immigrated and done their very best, but not everyone can rise to the top. We are sorry to say.
Yes,
There it is.
that's right. That's right.
Mm.
Beautiful.
Cecilia, if there was anybody or a few people from this era that would, you could like a chess piece, place them into that era and uh they would succeed, they would excel. Do you have any ideas on who those people would be?
I think these days, and it's been said, it was brought to my attention when I was asked, who are the Mrs. Astors of today?
Sure.
And as I scratched my head, the answer came not from me, but from the person who asked the question. Aren't the women who have been so successful in business today, uh, wouldn't they be fitted in that time for Mrs. Astor? Shouldn't now I'm blocking here, and Chris, you and Carol help me out.
Sure.
The woman who coined Lean In, who worked with Zuckerberg.
Carol
Um,
Sandburg, maybe?
Oh,
yes,
Yes.
yes.
Sandberg.
Yeah, I was,
Sandberg would be there, arranging parties, scheduling yachting trips to Europe, would be in the House of Worth for fittings. And here's what she would do that Mrs. Astor did herself, if I may. Uh, it was typical to travel to London in the between season and visit the House of Worth and be fitted for the gowns for the upcoming season. Now, those gowns would then be sewn, measured to order, and they would be shipped. They would have to go through customs and be taxed. Well, came a shipment of Mrs. Astor's gowns. I'm blocking the exact year. It was in the 1890s. Mrs. Astor's representative, the customs officers, found that the tax would be, in her view, exorbitant. She sent her representative back to the customs people to be negotiated down. They went back and forth. Each party dug in, and finally, Mrs. Astor, um, as would happen today, refused to pay the tax, and those gowns were sold off by the United States government.
wow.
And all season in social events, the whispered gossip was to ask, is that one of Mrs. Astor's gowns?
Right.
Because, and that's the sort of hard-nosed decision making that a woman executive moved back in a time travel to the Gilded Age. That's what we might find.
I have to ask because I just watched a wonderful documentary on her that's on Hulu and Disney Plus.
Right.
How would Barbara Walters have done in that era?
In Henry James's novel, um, about Isabel Archer, of the lady. There is a woman journalist, and in his snobbery and disdain, James named her Henrietta Stackpole. She is aggressive, assertive, never gives up. She's the Barbara Walters of then. Uh, Now there were other women journalists, Nellie Bly,
Yeah.
um, who, of course, got herself committed to the insane asylum to write about it, and then round the world in her Jules Vernish 80 days. It's a hireling of a newspaper baron, kind of a celebrity journalist. So I would say between Henry James's character, who was sort of an investigative reporter, and Nellie Bly, for whom that's a pseudonym, a made-up name.
Yeah.
Combine those two, and that's the Barbara Walters of the Gilded Age.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
That's it.
Back to Carol. Carol, you and I are full-time audiobook narrators. With all of these um, books that we take on, we've got to do a certain amount of research.
Yes.
For this, what was some of your process to get yourself into the right mode, into the right period and that's obviously we can hear it all over the audio. It sounds wonderful. But how do we get there?
I guess starting with my fascination with the era, I just did more research about it, and
What does
you
that
know,
entail? Can you tell us what
with
that
that.
entails? Your research?
Oh, so I will. It's usually a process of kind of a funnel. On the larger side, it's, I Googled the Gilded Age. Um, and as I go down, it's kind of a rabbit hole of the characters that created that time, um, but also even the architectural changes, um, and and by virtue of just adding to my knowledge, by reading, of course, your book, but also reading some other just research, essays, I guess
Sure.
you'd say,
Papers.
some papers. Yes, yes, that's better. Um, that started the process of being able to feel much more immersed in the world, but also even watching the Gilded Age, the show, was very helpful because I
Slide right,
think, what's that?
slide right in. Yes,
Yeah,
claro.
yeah, right.
Carrie Coon. Carrie Coon's a pretty good actor. She's pretty good.
She sure is. She sure is. And so is, the woman who is the matriarch, Christine Baranski.
Bransky, sorry.
Right.
Bransky.
That's it. Thank you. Yes. So those two, I tried not to think about those images of those two people, those two actors, but rather the essence of their attitudes and their quarrels and rivalry. So that really helped a lot. And watching what Cecelia puts down in terms of like how is the table set? How do you eat your soup? Just watching how they interpret that in the show
Yeah,
also brought it home for me. Yeah,
that's
it
awesome.
really was a great leap into that world.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
and the thing about audiobook narration is obviously, usually one of the tenets of doing, quality audiobook work is less is more. So when we come in, because when our listener comes in, a lot of people assume, especially in the nonfiction space, that it's a TED Talk that we're delivering,
Right.
to an arena of 800 people when it isn't. It's someone who has an
No.
earbud in their ear or they're driving in their car and we're having a conversation with them, you know?
Yep.
Interesting in this book and period books, I think in general, where it's okay to to punch the gas a little bit from time
Yeah.
to time and to really get into that spot. And I think I had fun with that when it came to Andrew Carnegie and Roosevelt and some of the things that I was able to do. Um,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
want I want to ask you, Cecelia, because your voice is in this too. You got to narrate a good amount of this, and
Yeah.
I had fun because I got to direct you. I had a blast working with you. How was it? How was that experience for you? Tell me about
Terrifying, terrifying.
Really?
Because because what you asked me to do were portions of documents that I knew they were important. Of course, I had read them and selected them and positioned them, but in no way had I thought of myself as reading them. And again, this is the style of the late 1800s. And those sentences are not our sentences.
no.
You know, I mean, the notion that Hemingway changed our subject verb object sentence structure is meritorious.
Yes.
So here I was, and it's rolling and it's expensive studio time, and I'm hoping not to flub. So, and my
Oh,
hands are cold, and I was glad to get in and out alive. That's how I felt, Chris.
Cecilia, you did wonderful.
yeah.
I appreciate you so much lending your voice. We didn't want to do a ton of heavy lifting on it because audiobook narration is an inundating process. And Carol and I have been doing this for 10 plus years each. Carol, I think you're going on to you've been doing this for maybe
Since 98.
two, yeah, a little longer than
A little
that.
bit.
So this is we understand what kind of anvil by the end of the day that you have on your back, but I think for what we assigned, it was it sounds wonderful and it
I
makes
love Anvil. I love Anvil.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. It
great.
is. It is accurate too, I think.
yeah,
Ooh.
it can be.
Yeah.
Of
But I'd like to ask a question, may I?
course.
So, Cecilia, did you feel did you feel that you could bring the rhythm uh, before the show? We talked a bit about
Mhm.
the rhythm that
Yes,
you're
yes.
finding and looking for and creating. Did you find that uh, just another easy way in because you created it? Um,
Are you asking about the sound of your voice as you read?
no, I'm asking about your experience as you were reading.
Oh,
If it you know
well, Carol, mostly. I was not reading what I wrote. I was reading from documents
true.
that needed to be in place, but I had no hand in choosing those sentences or any relation to those sentences.
Okay.
And so
That's what
I felt like I
prefect
was reading
payment.
the congressional record.
Oh
So,
gosh, yes. Okay.
and it was kind of cold too. So okay.
You mean the studio was cold?
No, it
The
was
read.
the reading was cold when you said, "Now, Cecelia, if you'll read this." Um,
Sure.
and I stepped up, but I had no prior. You hadn't. I may be misremembering, but Chris, I don't remember you saying, "Listen, when you get into that booth, I'm going to ask you to read this, this, and this."
Oh yeah. No, you were okay. So
And,
you were definitely sent all your reading assignments. So what we do is we
was I?
give that to you previously so that you can review it,
Oh,
and then you would prep it like we prep it. So what we do is with everything that we read it before we read it.
I must have missed that.
Oh,
Yeah, you
What you?
definitely. I would never say, "Hey, here on the day, here,
right.
take this."
Right.
Even
Well,
though even though
let
you're
me
the
say,
author of it,
okay,
you,
having missed it, but let me say uh, that Chris, you wrote. I know you're going to edit this. I hope you're going to edit this chat we're doing right now. You asked me to write a little introduction of
yeah.
myself, whatever, and I did that. And you rewrote it, and it was so much better. I thought, oh my God, let this
Oh, I
man.
only touched I only
Oh,
touched a couple of sentences.
oh, fabulous,
That's it.
fabulous. So I was so thankful.
I'm still yours.
Law. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, that's the thing about being the company that we are, and that we're becoming a full publishing house. So I'm
Wow.
doing a lot of editing. I'm starting to do that on a regular basis, but Kara will also tell you that as audiobook narrators, we have a curse. Every time we're driving in our car and we see a sign that has a letter out of a
Oh,
misplaced letter in there and something's misspelled, we
oh,
basically get an arrow that gets stuck into our eyeball. We're
exactly.
like, are you kidding? So we see everything. And because
Yes.
when you narrate, and especially the second time we do it, there's no better way to proof something. There's no better way to find out if something has errors in it than vocalizing it and then
Yeah.
vocalizing it again.
So
That,
true. So true.
that's so interesting. I am old enough to remember the great days of radio drama and
Oh.
including the soap operas.
Sure.
Um,
Mm.
my grandmother had a wholesale bakery, and when her two wrappers came to wrap those oatmeal cookies in packages on that big radio shaped like a cathedral, there came
Yes.
Ma Perkins and Helen Trent. And so the auditory sort of fullness that I mean the whole room was filled. So now the audio book fills that function, and I will tell you, and Chris, you know this, that I've made a terrible mistake in self-publishing some fiction, not waiting for an agent. Terrible
Mm.
mistake.
Mm.
Uh, and 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 when the question I've been asked, is there an audio book? And I say no. And people are disappointed because that's how they get their books. They're in the car, they're wherever, or they're in the house. It's the audiobook. People are not sitting down to read print pages. There's not time. And I think the audiobook is taking over books.
Yes.
I know you would get a lot of pushback from print people, but it's gone that way.
Story, but I know that feeling of when you're as a listener anyway. Do you think this, Chris, that you can tell fairly quickly if you know the genre, even if that person is going to match with it and mesh with it? Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
Interesting.
It's,
Interesting.
I will say the more one listens and the more one immerses themselves into the audiobook world in their comps and their comparisons to their own book,
yeah.
they're able to really figure out and be involved in that process of, okay, I want to help find the narrator for my book. But I will tell you, Cecelia, nowadays, all the companies, the big fives, all the big companies are using um, author approval as a hook for you, the author. So every, like I would say 95% of the books now that are published with an audio publishing company have some level of audio consent, author consent, I should say,
Okay.
for the audio.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's a change. That's probably in the last 5 or 6 years, I'd say, Carol, wouldn't you?
Okay.
I
That,
would,
Hmm.
yes, yes.
Hmm.
It used to be the publisher would choose you,
yeah,
would cast you. And usually you didn't even have to audition. Well, often you did not have to audition.
Hmm.
So it's even uh, less accurate a barometer because they're just thinking of you or your voice, not
Hmm.
your voice with this material.
Yes,
But
yes.
now it is exactly that. The actors are reading from the script and sending at least three voices to you to choose from.
Oh, interesting. Oh,
however, in
good.
some cases, we are
Progress.
absolutely experts at choosing the right narrators. And so on this book, having the three of us on this book, there could be no better triumvirate.
I agree. I agree. And Chris, did you do a lot of study of the people you played? You played quite a lot of different.
Yeah, the way I, and this kind of deviates from some of the other narrators in our industry. So I am, and Cecelia, so there's two camps in nonfiction, right? There's the camp that if there's dialogue and quotes, just read the quotes. Just read the quotes. And then there's the camp that is like me, who, when you just read the quotes, I don't want to even listen. I want to
Yeah.
be entertained, even from nonfiction.
Mhm.
So my rule is if the person is alive or dead, but mainly alive because then the person might actually listen to it. And they heard you doing the voice. What would they think?
Great.
And so that's my barometer.
That's a
I do
test.
these things.
That's a
I
test.
say, okay, I empathetically put myself into the other person's shoes and their brain, and I say, what would I want this person to sound like reading these lines that I said in my real life?
Yes.
That's the way I do it. And it's not everybody's cup of tea. And but if I'm working with a producer as a narrator, I know I am a producer and publisher, right? But if I'm working as a narrator and I'm a hired hand, if they say, no, Chris, I just want you to just say the lines, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. I'm going to say, of
Right.
course, I'm going to read it that way. But if they
Sure.
say, if I'm self-directing and I'm going to let them know, hey, I'm going to give some variety to these particular people. And I usually get no one gives me any pushback on that. And
Yeah.
and that's what I want to listen to. And I'm somebody who's listened to 1,000 audiobooks. So I want to listen to that.
Yeah. I agree.
All right, I'll second the motion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa.
But did you have to do a lot of studying about these people?
Oh, so let me so my process, if the person existed or exists, I find an interview with them.
Yeah.
I will find something where they are either in audio or on video, and I'll watch. And I'm a mimic. I'm an impressionist. I've
Oh,
been doing impressions for almost 30
Wow.
years.
Ooh.
So I've done, I'm the hack comic, and I was a stand-up comic for a while. So or not a good one, but I'm a better impressionist than I was a stand-up comic. But I would do Chris Walken and William Shatner, and so all the hacky people, I would do them really well. So I would play these guys on radio. I would be them in like in a sports radio show. We would do a bit, and I would come on and I would be that character for 15 minutes. And we'd only script certain things, like do an outline, but then I'd be improving off the cuff. So once I see a vocal pattern, pitch, movement, any ticks, I'll pick those things up and then I'll add them. And then and so the voice will sound at least like the cousin of that person. That
yeah, that's beautiful. That's
Fascinating. Fascinating.
And when they're dead, of course, I guess you use their written material or stories about them to
sure.
glean that same kind of thing. I see.
Like
That's
for instance,
what I do too.
yeah, for instance, like say if you're reading American history. So I like to some of my students I teach this, right? If I'm reading an American history book and it has Hamilton, Washington, Adams, and Jefferson in it, are all those guys going to sound the same? No, they can't. They can't because of all the content that's already out. When we think of Adams, who are you thinking of? You're thinking Paul Giamatti first, and I'm thinking Eddie Marsan second because
Okay. Yeah.
we've had TV shows with both of those guys playing them recently, like Eddie Marsan doing them on Franklin, and John Adams being John Adams with Paul Giamatti doing him for a full miniseries.
Yeah.
For Washington, I think of David Morse right away. I'm thinking him playing him. Um, and Jefferson, I think it was Stephen Delane. Like so these guys
Um,
have there's an image that's in there, so you kind of like that's kind of takes itself, and so at least it's there's some variety there where it brings a nice conversation.
yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's
Oh,
great.
see, and from my little library carrel, so to speak, I'm looking at photographs of them, and I'm looking at their letters. How more their letters than their polished works to get a sense of the word choices, the pauses. Um, Back then in the Gilded Age, a lot of commas. Did they love commas?
Oh, yes. Yes.
But
Is that the
okay,
Oxford, Cecelia? I'm not a grammatist. Is that the Oxford comma? Is that what is it? Is
you
that
know, I
Oh,
don't know. I
that's
don't know that phrase, but
that. Mm,
commas are disappearing.
they,
And the grammatical rules, pounded into us way back, have eased a lot. And I think it's for streamlining, it's for speed. Again, people, the reader wants to move, and the comma is an interruption. And God help us, a semicolon. I mean, they're like antiquated,
I know.
Well,
It feels like, yeah, like
yes, yes,
what
the
I don't even understand.
runestones. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
And there's that book on grammar, Each Shoots and Leaves. Have you heard
yes,
of this?
yes, yes.
And in it there's a quote, and I don't remember who said it, but that the comma is like when you have a dinner party and the men push back their seats to get up to go have their cigars. The
That's
comma,
right. That's a
just
that's a good
push
one.
back
Yes.
their seats.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. Right, right.
But but that's a really good point that and I think it really helps to have, Shakespeare was very much about the punctuation, and yes, I see that so much in the Gilded Age, and really in most writing until, really the modern times, where it's as if the editors have been beamed up to another planet. I mean, sometimes it's not that they eschew the comma, they just don't even know how to use it.
I think that's
Oftentimes.
true. Here's another. Let me join the bitch and moan society for just a moment. Okay. So, you got the Wall Street Journal on the weekends. I love Here are books. How many pages? 750 pages. It must be cheaper to print than to edit. If I see something that's much over 350, I want to know who thinks it's going to be worth my time
Yeah.
to spend this much of the season on you for that.
And
Mhm.
Cecelia, I'm imagining that's nonfiction mostly you're looking at, right? Nonfiction.
Mostly it is.
Okay.
Here and there there's fiction. Yes, but I think you're right. I think the fictioneers have got the message. I know there's a terrific Irish writer, Claire Keegan, Keegan. Now,
Yeah.
somehow she is a devotee of commas, and I'd like to ask her, what's with the commas? But her books are about 100 pages.
Ah,
Every word counts. That's the game. Your words should count. Um, those fillers, those spin the wheels words, get them out, and get them out for the Carols who are going to be narrating and reading. And you have to deal with these non-functional words and turn them into something because they're there.
that's it.
They're there.
That's right. And even if you're a great, literarily, if you're really on top of things, um, you still have these authors, most authors, who are writing for the eye, not the ear. And so our job, I think, Chris, you might agree, that is to some degree to parse into digestible bites for the listener a lot of the phrases and word groups, etc.
Oh, I
So,
love hearing that. I love hearing that from the
oh,
side of the ear and the parts.
Yeah,
yeah,
Digestible.
yeah,
digestible, more palatable, and um generally smoother. So what would catch your eye and be difficult to read, we kind of smooth that away. That's part of what we do. Fighting. We're throwing an
Oh,
uppercut, hook,
but
and
oh,
another hook.
okay,
So and so
but
it's
look, I've got to come in. I'm watching a morning show it's a few years ago. It's two writers who were at a romance convention, romance con,
okay.
and they were being interviewed. And they were, big fans of romance. And here's what they said. If the story is good, it doesn't matter if the writing isn't very good. The story above the writing. And I went, yeah.
No, yeah, good.
But I had to listen to what they were saying.
Yeah,
Seriously.
it's
yeah.
well. This is what I'll tell you. When it comes to the audio,
Fascinating.
Cecilia, when it comes to the audio, uh, again, this is what I was going to close out with. So, our job is to make a three into a seven without you knowing. So you think it's a 7 while you're listening because we apply performance aptitude to it. So we'll play with our pitch and our character growth, and the size of some things will become a little bigger when we would normally, if the writing was really concise and clean, we'd not have to do
That's,
as much.
that's right. Yeah.
But because it's a performance, in some cases we can get away with it. Um, the issue is when you know that we're doing that, then it's not a 7. Like it's somewhere less than a 7. So it becomes, then we're only, but I always say you can improve a book 40% with the audio, but that's the peak. So we can make a 6 into a 10. We can make a 5 into a 9. You can make a 2 a 6, but that's
Yeah.
the limit.
So that's the magic of what you do.
That's fascinating, Chris. Yeah.
And we're when we leave the studio after that, after that day, you want to talk anvils. You've got 2 anvils on your shoulder, one on your back. You're pulling an ox cart full of anvils behind you. There's a lot going on. And those we like books like yours that flow. That
Yeah.
just
Love that.
flow and are
Love
able to.
hearing that. Oh, I want to hug. We got to do it again.
Yes. Yes.
I
Let's
have
do
one more thing. One more thing I have to say though, because this is Origins, and I just want to mention where we met, because you, my friend, our friend Eric Martin, he and I were in Vegas, probably a year and a half ago, and Cecelia was launching her mid-century cocktails
A
book.
comic classic, cars and motorcycles. I mean, it's such great. There's an atomic museum.
Yep.
It's a great museum.
Wow.
But the evening event was allied with the museum, and um, they sell old cars and that are, souped up. I mean,
Yep.
so here was this incredible, was like an airplane hangar full of old cars,
Wow.
but beautifully restored. I mean, beautifully.
Was 5 buildings that were kind of like a landscape of almost like a cul-de-sac. It was like this that had all the parking was in the center, but it had buildings that were designed
Oh,
square.
oh,
Uh,
fascinating.
Oh,
yeah, it
wow.
was really fascinating. And Eric is interesting, like, as he was thinking of moving there. And so he was doing a lot of investigating of like little places to eat and like cool events. And he found this event. And then we were sitting together and we were basically looking at each other and like, who's going to talk to her about audiobooks? We both ended up talking to her, but I was the one that ended up making the deal. So so it ended up being
Oh.
And I had one business card buried in my wallet. I mean, so deep.
Ah,
And here, whether it's you or and gouging into the wallet to get this card, and I thought, this is Vegas. Who are these bums? So,
these bums. Yeah, that was just a really fantastic night, and your presentation was wonderful,
well, it
Cecilia.
was fun.
Yeah.
Read the room, and if you see people who are interested, oh, sweeties, let's do it. Um,
right.
it's all the difference. Yeah.
Sure.
And,
Sure.
and hopefully, we're gonna do this book, and then we're gonna do Gilded Age cocktails.
This,
So,
this has been so fun.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
really
appreciate your
has.
time. What would Mrs. Astor do? The Essential Guide to the Manners and Mores of the Gilded Age, out on exclusively on Audible for the meantime. And then here on this will be on YouTube. Below you can see the our audiobook link, and we'll also have your ebook link up, Cecilia. So if people want your
Yay.
ebook, they can get linked to it and
Yay.
read
Yay.
your Kindle.
All
That's
righty.
perfect. Perfect.
Applause.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so much
both.
for
This
your
has
time.
been, yeah. And it's made it that much more enjoyable to have done this because it's always nice to hear the post in a way, when you're processing what just happened.
Yes,
And
yes.
it's just been great to hear you both.
Well, it's been wonderful to meet you. My life is enriched. All right. Hey,
And on to the promotion. Let's make some sales.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Leonardo Audio. Your story told right.